Fiction. Hello everyone. A lot of Americans idolize Mr. Tom Hanks. Just looking at the title is enough to see the end. American's dad, that's right. Father of America 40 years ago. From the movie Forrest Gump to Captain Sully, he has performed countless inspirational and soothing stories, but recently, in this new movie he plays a Democrat presiding over but another main character as a journalist is wasting his energy. Want to find out your bad news? This as a journalist specializing in the negative aspects. The article he wrote also won an award titled, Exposing Darkness in Society, Live to Understand Human Evil. However, due to too many crimes, so he couldn't stay in this chaotic place very soon. He was extremely depressed at that moment. The leader gave him a job. Tell me to interview someone. That's Mr. Tom. He finished listening like dumbfounded. It is the person in charge of the children's program. With a humble appearance, it is the person in charge of the children's program that loves children. The leader also emphasized, now Mr. Tom may be the only celebrity agree to let him interview. You should do a good job of this. It can be said that the existence of Mr. Tom's position is similar to Ha Gun, Wang Ham, two famous Chinese show hosts, always be in front of the television screen with the most direct, positive image. So this man once was dug out of bad news. Only a few minutes will become attractive search keywords. Therefore, the journalist intended to promote his own talent to write malicious words causing Mr. Tom to collapse. For example, say, amazing. He did not feel guilty about turning the car this time. Just generate 1 million likes. You may reappear in magazines. First meeting Mr. Tom. As in the recording program, the journalist stood behind to observe. Unexpectedly, Mr. Tom immediately recognized him despite being recording. He rushed to run again, chat with him. The next colleague, who could not stand it, immediately criticized, were we unable to fire him? The journalist was very upset with Mr. Tom's enthusiastic welcome but shyly refused. Mr. Tom returned to the footage. Unfortunately, the problem was encountered. Originally wanted to teach children how to use tents, but as a result, he himself did not know how to clean the tent on the TV. A clumsy Tom appeared in front of the surveillance screen as the director provoking provocations. The journalist saw this scene. His cold heart suddenly gave birth to a bit of regret. The director told Mr. Tom, if you do not shoot well, you can go back and forth a few times, but Mr. Tom refused. He said children must know whether the adult will calculate well, but this still won't work out as expected. Mr. Tom asked about the journalist's family, interested in his childhood. It seems this time meeting the journalist as the one being interviewed. After finishing the conversation, Mr. Tom had to return to continue recording. Be a person in charge of the highly respected children program. Just held out your hand to act the puppet. Just voiced the puppet. A serious expression is singing a cheerful song. The journalist was a bit surprised. He saw Mr. Tom for the first time behind the stage with a tired expression. This man has bad news. He fell into a pensive mood. This is a journalist specializing in writing on the negative side because the language is too cruel should always offend everyone. Now there is only one person willing to accept his interview, that is Mr. Tom. Mr. Tom is the host of a high-esteemed children's show like Ha Gun and Wang Ham of the Chinese version. This place would like to introduce a few words. This person in America, completely real, from 1968 to 2001, accompany the maturity of many generations of Americans. He has a lot of respect for himself in this country. There is also only one such Tom Hanks. An actor is called the Father of America. Just dare to accept this role. However, the journalist did not believe much. What in the world do there are saints? He approached Mr. Tom, just looking for your bad news. Write an explosive post because at this time his work is not favorable. Taking care of family is not good either. Not getting along with his wife, fight with dad. He really has to write an article that gets 1 million likes to reverse the situation. Now the second time we met, journalist and Mr. Tom met at the hotel. You keep asking Mr. Tom, could it be that he doesn't have any negative feelings? But Mr. Tom shied away from saying anything. The journalist repeatedly demanded. He then took out the puppets, pretend to be a tiger and tell him watch out. This interview failed again. Journalist and Mr. Tom together took the train back home. Mr. Tom was recognized by the children on the train. The children sang the theme song of his show together. This is a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Do you vow to be me? People who around me, whether male or female, old or young, police or passers-by, are all singing the song together. Only the journalist with a cold face looking at everyone. He returned home seeing the father who hates me. He was indignant no matter what his father explains. He all used harsh words until the father fell to the floor. He still stood still there. The journalist's father had a terminal illness, but he has a minor 3. Should he forgive him? This incident was like an obstacle caused by the devil in the journalist's heart, but Mr. Tom seemed to be unfamiliar. At first glance he saw his pain, and in this interview, someone like Mr. Tom, because the journalist made a great deal to create a scene at Mr. Tom's studio. He seemed to be shrunk. He suddenly looked around. Puppet in tree hole. The king in the castle. Rabbit ears grew out of his head, lulled to sleep by these colorful children's stories in a world without chaos. At that time the giant wife and Mr. Tom go to him singing the song. Asked him since when did he become so angry. When Mr. Tom kept forcing him to ask him, the journalist had no way to hide it. His childhood heart is tightened in that way. Please let it all out in front of everyone. At that time he comes again into a dark space, seeing her lost mother. His mother said, you make me feel angry and miserable, but these are not what I want. In that moment the journalist immediately felt more comfortable. Finally he woke up after a nightmare that he couldn't let go of. At restaurant, the journalist has forgotten his assigned job. He talked to Mr. Tom, would you please join me in doing this one thing? Think of those who love us. Time seems to stop. Mr. Tom's deep eyes looked at the journalist, then look in front of the camera. Look straight at me and you in front of the screen. Late at night, he and his wife go for a walk. He realized he needed to deal with his feelings. Well, a wife sees her husband husband's repentance should also forgive him. You have to visit Jerry. He knows that then is the time to go to do one last thing. You with mixed emotions to my father's house. In this moment he just knows the whole truth. Disease of his father and mother are not simple things to you. Tam is not a minor. 3 only after his mother died she was a close companion to take care of him. Turns out there are many things not as he himself thought, suffering in vain for so long. If you come one step early how good it is. One day in the evening he and his father drink alcohol quietly. In the night he finally said sincere words to his son. I'm very sorry, son, I still love you. I love you too, Dad. These two seemingly simple sentences talking to those closest to me, but the opposite is the most difficult to say. The adult world is not easy. Even a saint like Mr. Tom at the last scene also shows the need to let go of an emotional side, but this most famous perfect children's program host, the journalist, always made it difficult when facing him. Still show understanding and tolerance. Use your warmth to all adults who need treatment like journalists done once. Spa Tam Soul. The whole episode brings a healing warmth but is also close to life, can make each person feel. After watching this movie, we will remember the person who loves us and whom we love, appreciate them, especially now after the epidemic is over. Don't get stuck in worries, learn to share, always share. Goodwill movie. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, rated by Time magazine in the top 10 of the year domestic on September 18th. Also voted recommend everyone to watch this movie to feel the great acting of Mr. Tom Hanks.